And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io. I'm here with Patrick McGinnis, a VC and an author. Good afternoon, Patrick, or good evening, I think, where you are.
Yeah, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Very good, thanks. Good to be
No,
here.
yeah, great. So now that we're started, could you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure. So I do a couple of different things. First of all, I'm a venture capitalist. I've invested in companies in the United States and in Latin America. Second, I'm an author. I wrote a book called The 10% Entrepreneur that came out a couple of years ago. And I have a new book coming out May 5th, 2020 called Fear of Missing Out, Practical Decision Making in a World of Overwhelming Choice. And I am the host of a podcast called FOMO Sapiens that's distributed by Harvard Business Review.
Great. You're a busy guy.
Yes, too busy.
So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as a remote employer and a remote employee, and as a venture capitalist that funds companies that probably use remote employees?
Yeah, it's interesting. I love that question because I started my career working in a very traditional office setting. I worked at JP Morgan in New York, and I had the office where you close the door.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of my career, and that was very typical. And nobody worked remotely at that time. There wasn't even Skype, for goodness sake. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I heard about a fully remote company was a company that I was an advisor to called, it's not called Torre. In the past, it was called Voice Bunny. And the entire company was remote. So literally of 30 people at the time, and I'm sure it's bigger now, people were in all parts of the world. And in fact, they did this fun thing every summer. They would go choose one city and all move there and work together. So they were at Tokyo one time. And so really interesting. And I remember thinking, like, how does this work? How can you get anything done if everybody's remote? I was pretty skeptical, but I knew the company well, and I saw how successful they were. So I figured, well, this is interesting, but not for everybody. Now I kind of do everything remote. So for example, I have a team of people that work with me on all of my book stuff, promoting and everything that is around my book and podcasting kind of business. And our team is in 5 countries, 5 people in 5 countries. And so we work remotely all the time. We manage over, sort of remote calls and WhatsApp and messaging. And I think it's a really cool, flexible way to work. And I love the fact that you can gain access to talent anywhere in the world.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been doing remote for about over 10 years now. The first company I did it full time almost was like 2012, where all the executives were in different parts of the country. And we just came in, it was based in Chicago. We just came in once a month and that was it. And Chicago it's convenient and there's lots of cheap flights into Chicago. So made it easier.
There you go.
What has been your takeaway from these experiences?
So I think for me, there's a couple of different things I think you need to do to be successful when you work remotely. And there's a really interesting book that I would encourage people to look at called Back to Human by Dan Schawbel, who is a friend of mine. And I actually just interviewed him for my podcast. And it's about how you can create humanity in a remote workplace. Because I think one of the things that happens is, and I do this myself, your communication style when you're in an office with somebody and you build rapport on a day-to-day basis is a certain thing. And then when you're working remotely, especially if you're maybe just doing intermittent calls and there's a lot of back and forth messaging, maybe not suitable. You may be too harsh with people, maybe misinterpreted. So I realized my mom told me this. She's like, all your emails are 3 words. And I realized that perhaps my style is not coming across because in my heart, I love you, but maybe I'm being a bit terse. And so I've actually told my team straight up, this is my communication style. I don't want you to think that I am somehow unhappy with you. It's just that I like to be brief. I think that's one thing. I think another thing I've learned is coordination is key, and flexibility is key. And the third thing, which is super important, you got to have good comms. If you can't talk to people, hear what they're saying, see them, it's very difficult to get things done. And it's awful, with my VC fund, the head offices in Lima, Peru, we had to, invest in telecom equipment so that we would have a better experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree 100% on that, dude. Especially in the world of texting, a lot of times what you text, how it's received is not what you meant. I have a rule with both my kids that after 3 texts back and forth, I'm going to call them because something's going to get missed in the conversation. So what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think needs to be done differently to make it more effective and just better in general?
So right now we're taping this at the onset of the coronavirus, and everybody's a remote worker now, right?
Yes.
Everybody, literally everybody, unless your job doesn't permit that. You're a doctor, you're food delivery, all the things that are that are still allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the future is that people are going to realize, number one, that they're effective.
Mm-hmm.
They'll realize where they're effective. They'll also realize where they're not effective. And I think
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen out of this is going to be a lot of businesses that are going to come into being that try to address some of these issues. And I think that the other thing is that there's going to be a lot of thought around, um, the environmental impact of traveling to work every day and commuting and things like that. And I just don't see any reason why, if you live in a city, you hear about these people with these mega commuters traveling 45 minutes to an hour why? That stuff could be replaced by remote working. So I think we're going to see a lot of this sort of, we are being forced to assess remote working as a realistic option for many more people in the economy. And I think it's here to stay. That being said, as I mentioned before, it's all about experience. So if you don't have good infrastructure, if the picture is grainy, if you have trouble communicating with people, it's going to make it less effective. So I think we're going to have to see a lot more improvement on that front.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It was funny because for a year in there, I was working as a contractor, a consultant for a company in the city, and they wanted me in there 5 days a week. And they made me an offer, and I'm like, I'm losing 2 hours a day driving into, there and back. And I just said, no, thanks. I'm gonna stay out on my own. So yeah, I agree.
Commuting so unhealthy, right? Sitting on that train or whatever, it's very bad for you. You're just the vibrations. I'm no expert, but that's what friends have told me who commute a lot. It's just bad for you sitting on that bus or train or whatever in that car. And then it's a waste. It's bad for the environment. It's just, there's just we got to do better.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to see how the world does change after this. It's going to be very interesting. And I wonder about companies like Regus and WeWork and all that. I mean, there's a potential that they could really boom because people are going to say, hey, I don't want to do the hour commute, but I'll do the 10-minute commute a couple times a week, and I'll have an office where I have no distractions.
That's a big question. I've been thinking a bit about what will happen to WeWork in this crisis because part of it can make that argument. And I know that, that is for example, in Peru, again, where the traffic is really bad and where my colleagues are, there are many people who go to the closest co-working to their house instead of going into the head office all the time. So you see that in places where there's mega commutes and bad traffic. At the same time, right now, the whole point of WeWork is community and being with a group of people and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, do you really want to beat anybody? So it's a really tricky question for their business model. How, because you're packed into the gills there and everything is shared. And so, whoosh, that it'll be there. I don't know how they're going to evolve their business model, but I can tell you a friend of mine actually runs a big part of their business and he's super smart. So if anybody can do it, he can.
Yeah, well, that's good. And the other thing that I think that's interesting is people are working from home now with, I don't have kids. My youngest is 30. But people are working from home with their kids, and that's a different challenge. But once the kids go back to school, I think people are going to be like, hey, I think they're going to be demanding it.
Yeah, likely.
Yeah, so totally. Cool. So let's talk about your book, all right? Tell me more about your book and both your books now and the terms you came up with, and how did you come to coin both these terms that have now been added to our conversations, especially FOMO?
Yeah. Okay, so I basically wrote 2 books. The first one is called The 10% Entrepreneur, Live Your Startup Dream Without Quitting Your Day Job. And I wrote that. It came out in 2016, published by Penguin. And basically that book is about how we can all become entrepreneurs without quitting our day jobs, because the paradigm of either you have a full-time job at a company or you're a full-time entrepreneur has shifted tremendously. People now are working much more flexibly, as we've been talking about on this discussion. And therefore, it's very sensible to, if you have an idea for a business you want to pursue, to consider launching it part-time on the side, seeing if it works before going in full-time. And so that's really what the book is about. And the numbers support that. You have 40% of Americans are freelancers in some type or another. This is a type of freelancing, but it's more than freelancing because you actually are building something that you own, not just sort of working for somebody else by the hour. So that's a really critical distinction. But I have seen this really grow over time. You see so many people starting businesses. And right now, if you're working from home watching this, or you're stuck at home because of the coronavirus, and hopefully that will be over by the time everybody sees this. But if you are, you can use that time to think about ideas that you could launch. So that's the first book. The new book is called Fear of Missing Out: Practical Decision Making in a World of Overwhelming Choice. And what that is about is FOMO, fear of missing out, and FOBO, fear of a better option. Now, the story here is that when I was a student at Harvard Business School, I actually invented both of those terms and wrote about them in the school newspaper back in 2004. So many people only heard about FOMO and FOBO, more recently. It was actually added to the dictionary, FOMO was, in 2013. But I was the first one to ever use them, and it's on the internet. So, Google it. And so basically, these are terms that many people know. FOMO, it's this idea that something better is out there happening and you want to be a part of it. Causes anxiety. But FOBO is a fear of better option. It's the idea that people won't make decisions because they're waiting for something better to come along. And so they basically have analysis paralysis. They get stuck. And those two afflictions have become major parts of our society. And you see that the FOMO is, something that we all feel. FOBO, I think it comes to everything from the way businesses are run to the way that our government works. So thinking about Brexit or even the response to the coronavirus, there's a lot of FOBO happening, indecision, waiting for a better option when, the reality is for many things, the longer you wait, the worse the options get. And so I wanted to write a book about this, and I based it on my own experiences. I did a ton of research, and then I have a podcast called FOMO Sapiens, as I mentioned, which I've been able to interview some major sort of figures about how they make decisions. Everybody from Andrew Yang to the president of Chobani and many other sort of public figures. And so I've been learning from those people and then adding in my own research and learning in order to come up with this book. And so I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be hopefully helpful to people who are trying to make decisions. And it comes out May 5th, 2020.
Great. Well, I look forward to getting it myself. I look forward to reading it. And do you know when it will be available for pre-order on Amazon by chance?
It's already available for pre-order. Go to Amazon, Fear of Missing Out, Patrick J. McGinnis, or go to patrickmcginnis.com. You can find it there. Yes, pre-order. It's available in Kindle as well. So, however you want to consume it, it's there for you.
Great. I look forward to it. So how do you incorporate the idea of remote in your mode of working? You have a very unique, I wouldn't say job, but career.
Yeah. I have a totally weird, but by the way, just the inability to leave my apartment at this moment is really throwing me off because I've had to be better at working from home, and I could do better at that in terms of being focused. But I used to be actually a WeWork member, and I left it because it was super loud and hard to get things done. And I used to call it We Don't Work because many of the people that were working around me didn't seem to be doing anything all day except for socializing. So it wasn't for me. I work out of a different sort of space. It's called BetaWorks Studios, and it's kind of like a open, plain, members-only club for working. I'm part of the Harvard Club of New York, which has a lot of space for working. And I'm a part of a place called Soho House, which is also like a social club. And I work from those three. And then when I write books, I tend to go away. So I spent a month in Portland, Maine in the middle of the winter to write my first book. I spent a month in Mexico City, or 6 weeks in Mexico City, to write my second book. So I find that to write books, the best thing to do is to just isolate yourself. Social isolation is not new to me. I've been doing it to write my books for the last 5 years.
Wow. So maybe we'll have another book come out of it. Who knows?
That's why. Listen, I have lots of ideas. Let me tell you. I think times of change and transition are to be embraced and to be learned from, and then hopefully they give us new ideas.
Yeah, great. So in the current situation, due to the ongoing pandemic, many companies have been forced to go remote, even educational institutions. In situations such as this, what are the major roadblocks and challenges, especially to startups, that you from your VC hat there?
Yeah, I think the big question there is preparedness. If you are not prepared to do this and you're scrambling, which is the vast majority of companies, I'll give you a great example. I'm on the board of a company that's in the call center space, and there have been rules put in place in the Philippines where we have tons and tons of people that basically we have to go remote with our workers. And that may not even be possible for certain clients. Certain clients don't allow remote working because of security issues with data and stuff. And so if you don't have a plan and then it's mandated upon you overnight, it is very difficult to respond. And so I think one of the things that's interesting, just like disaster recovery, with data, people are going to start to have these kinds of plans around remote working as well if they don't have them already.
Yeah, that's true, because it's here for good. So yeah. So being forced to be self-quarantined today, how do FOMO and FOBO pan out?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, FOMO, I feel the FOMO. I mean, I
Mhm.
think we've seen about it. Some people have said, oh, there's no FOMO anymore because we're stuck at home. I don't know. I'm feeling it. I felt it when I bought all that toilet paper that I bought 2 weeks ago. I see
Did
it with
you?
people. Oh, I mean, I'm embarrassed, but yes, I have plenty of toilet paper. If anybody
Mhm.
needs them, call me.
All right.
I feel it when I see people who aren't willing to socially distance themselves, and you see it. And like every day that's nice in New York City, people are out in the streets, and most people are being super respectful, but some people aren't.
Mhm.
I think we're seeing this in the fact that I'm being better at this than I probably expected. But I have a good friend who said, I never even cared about Twitter, and now I'm sneaking off to the bathroom just so I can check it during the day. So the news FOMO is really pervasive. At the same time, I think a lot of us are accepting the fact that we can't leave our homes and therefore doing something else with our time. I was reading a book today, for example, that I've been wanting to read for months. So there's something good about that. On the FOBO, I think the FOBO is really it's really pernicious and
Mhm.
pervasive right now because, for example, I live in New York City. Should I stay here? Should I go somewhere else? Well, I don't know. It's a huge dilemma, and I'm waiting for more data to decide, but I don't know. So there's a lot of decisions when we have uncertainty and we get stuck. And so I've been actually using the strategies in my book to overcome those, and they seem to work so far. But thank God I wrote a book on this. Otherwise, I'd be really in trouble.
So interesting because I saw a movie the other night. It was about dating among Gen Z or the younger kids, and they say that what you just said, one of the reasons they have such a low marriage rate, they're waiting longer to get married, is the FOBO.
Yeah.
Because they have so many options at their fingertips.
Yeah, when you think about it, all the apps. Listen,
Mhm.
I get it. You're on an app, you can swipe forever. I mean,
Mhm.
unless you live in some remote place. If you're in sort of like northern Maine,
Mhm.
it's going to be difficult. But if you're in New York City or any other major metropolitan area, you can literally never exhaust your options. I had a friend who signed up for one of these dating sites called Hinge, the app, and he got 473, I guess, matches. I was just like, wow, what are you doing? Clearly you have some magic. And he was sort of like, I find it overwhelming and stressful and I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, and
So my advice was just, take it five at a time.
I know. Well, that's I mean the pure definition of FOMO, and could be why my 30-year-old son isn't isn't married.
Yeah, well, there you go. FOBO is when it comes to careers, dating.
Yeah.
If everything feels like you're going on to Netflix and you have so many choices, it's very hard to make decisions unless you have a strategy, which is why you should read my book.
And great, I will, and actually, right. Netflix is another good example. It's like you could just like, oh my God, there's so much to watch.
Totally.
So, and also back to remote uh, commuting. So there are companies like Gaper that help develop, build, and scale products, especially for startups. How important do you think such setups are in the startup world, and for founders, of companies that are looking to hire really good talent quickly?
Yeah, well, talent, it's all a war for talent, isn't it? Really, at
Mhm.
the end of the day, most startups, especially digital startups,
Mhm.
they're comprised of people. And so, and there can be FOBO too, because there's so many candidates out there, but also from the candidate side, there's so many companies out there. So you've got to have a plan. You've got to have the infrastructure in place if you're going to attract and retain great talent. So I think, it's clearly something that you have to put right at the top of your priorities.
Yes, great. So, well, Patrick, this has been really informative and a lot of fun for me. So, thank you so much for taking the time out today to join me. And I wish your book a lot of luck. Hopefully, a lot of people will be ordering it and learn from it because it sounds like you got some great ideas for them.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice night.
You too.